Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of our second season of the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Coen. On this episode, we're going to focus on historic preservation in Stafford County. If you go to the county's website or discoverstafford.org, you'll find a great deal of information about historic preservation in Stafford. The sites emphasize that historic preservation is the thoughtful management of cultural resources, which includes historic buildings, sites, structures, objects, and landscapes. The value of historic preservation is twofold. First, it helps preserve the unique character of a community. And second, it can serve as an economic engine for the community through tourism as well as a guide for economic development. Stafford has been the crossroads for many important events and travelers in our nation's history. The walking tour of Falmouth is a great example of the results of preserving that history. And so is Ferry Farm or Government Island or the Potomac Tribal Center, just to name a few. Of course, there are challenges to historic preservation. They include high cost of restoration, navigating strict regulations, finding funding, adapting old structures to modern environmental conditions, and so on. To help us consider those challenges in more detail, we've invited Sue Henderson on the program. She has a history of working on cultural resource projects for over a decade in the county. Many of you will remember her work as the director for the Stafford 350th anniversary celebration back in 2014. But in truth, that's just one of the many projects and organizations Sue has directed for the county over the years. Her dedication and experience to historic preservation in Stafford is really second to none, and we're lucky to have her on the program. Well, hi, Sue, and welcome to Stafford Connect.
Thanks.
So let's start off. I thought I'd ask you if to sort of introduce yourself to our audience. A lot of people know you because you've been so active in our community for so many years, but just give us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see the shortest version, right? I'm a military brat, never lived any place for very long. And then I was active duty. And then my husband and I were living in Europe for multiple years. And we came back in 94 and drove around the country for 6-7 months and looked for a place to live and chose here. I was a recreation specialist in civil service for the Air Force when we lived overseas. So I ended up as the recreation director out in King George County. And that's how we ended up coming here. So we've been here since 96.
Oh, wow.
And in the meantime, I've always been involved in event planning and arts and history. So I have since 2000 had my own business called Henderson Productions, which has involved me in lots of projects that you're referring to that a lot of people know me from.
And so I guess one question is Stafford the longest you've lived in anywhere?
By far.
Yeah.
By far. Until we moved here in 96, I had never lived any place longer than 4 years.
Yeah. I know, same here. It's like I got my thing from when I bought my recent house 23 years ago. I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, stunning to think that I've been in a place this long. Yeah,
really?
It was never intended either. We kind of thought we'd be here for 4 or 5 years and then move on.
Oh, neat.
Loved it.
And you've been a fixture in Stafford. A lot of people remember you from the Stafford 350th project that you did a number of years ago, which is hard to believe it's been that many years ago.
I know. It's been 11 years since we celebrated 350.
I know.
So I guess we're 341 years old, 61 years old.
Wow. So some of the stuff that you've done over the years, I mean, you could touch on that one. You could talk about the Historical Society or the Historical Commission. You've been masterful in the Museum and Cultural Center movement. And so any of those and all those you can touch on.
Well, let's start at the top, right? I first started working as an event planner for Historic Fredericksburg Foundation in 2000. And so for instance, that's the Candlelight Tour and any other events that they were planning. So sort of knew a lot about folks in that environment. And then I took a little break, a little bit from local stuff. I was still doing some of that, but I was a vocal director for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, so I was gone a lot. And during that time, a lot of my obviously, I'm a vocal director. I have a background in music. That's actually what my degree is in. But I really found that I was so much older than the kids that I was teaching all the material, that I was going out early in the morning to get some sense of adultness, and walking in a place and taking photos. And so I became involved in photography and then watercolor in the region. And so started getting a lot involved in the arts community. So I ended up being asked to be on the Fredericksburg Arts Commission for a while, and did a number of projects with them. Via Calori downtown was one of them. The Cats and Dogs, the fiberglass Cats and Dogs, Positively. I don't know if you remember them, and Fantastically. Yep. Both of those projects were fundraisers as event planning related to the arts that were on behalf of organizations, and mostly historical organizations in the community. So you get this connection of partnerships, right, and value to bringing things together. And I think it's one of the things that really is a through line for everything I've done, which is finding ways to bring people together and partner together in ways that work good for both of them, or work well for both. So anyway, that's how I was involved in Historic Fredericksburg Foundation, and that led to me being asked to submit an application for the 350th anniversary celebrations. And that actually for me was a 5-year project, because we started 3 years in advance. Then you had the full year of celebrations, and then really a long wrap up, because there was a lot of I's and T's to dot and cross. But we raised $1 million. We ran 35 programs that year. We involved over, we counted at least 25,000 people involved in different parts of those programs. Really trying to focus on what about Stafford's history is unique. And that's not easy. We're in Virginia, right? I mean, what about Fredericksburg is different from Stafford, is different from Williamsburg? There's a lot of that overlapping history. So we found plenty and had a great time doing it. And it was work. It was definitely work. But it was a great project, and I really enjoyed it. Most of all, I got invited to meet a lot of people in that project. So.
Now, and you all did a lot of videos.
We did.
With people. So tell us about those, and then I'm curious if there's a repository, that's the word I want, repository that people can still see those. Yes.
Well, we did a bunch of different video projects. We did a project with the school system where we did what was called Stafford Minutes. And the school system, I think they still have, maybe you would know, a video program where they were working on, all sorts of things. So we literally provided funding for students to research little 1-minute, 2-minute videos about different parts of Stafford history. And they were responsible for all of it. And it's a great learning opportunity, but it also gave us some videos. At the same time, we contracted with Ferry Farm to set up a Tell Your Stafford Story project where anybody could come and sit down and be interviewed. The staff there were trained, and it was more like a informal oral history program. But those are also on video. And then we made a 28-minute movie, a professional movie with some professional documentarians about all of Stafford history. So all of those things currently reside on discoverstafford.org. You can tap into all of them. Ferry Farm, of course, still has the Stafford stories. I believe the school system still probably has the Stafford Minutes, but most of those were hosted on YouTube.
Right.
So we can easily access those, but we have all the links on discoverstafford.org.
Okay. And that's great because, I teach a DE government now. It's brand new in the county, and it's the second half, basically second semester is state and local.
Right.
And so it'd be nice to tag into some of that local.
Yeah, it's fascinating if you want to learn about how Stafford schools were integrated direct from the source, or if you want to learn about how Ferry Farm was saved sort of from Walmart developments in 96 and 97, straight from the people who did that.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Those people came in and told those stories, and they're not. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. I wished that we had been able. There's lots of things you wish, right? I wish that we'd have been able to really entice more sort of come here people to come and talk about why they stayed. There's like, for instance, a huge military community in the county that has come here, liked it, loved it, wanted to stay, and doesn't necessarily have the ancient roots, so to speak, of being here. So I think obviously Stafford now is a balance of both. It'd been nice to have gotten some of those late 20th century stories. Still to be done.
Truly. And then anything with the Historical Commission? Because you did that for many years.
Well, I got asked to be on the Historic Commission after the Stafford 350th. I guess that was a natural outreach. And that's an appointment by the Board of Supervisors. Was that you, or was that Bob Thomas that put me
I think
there?
Bob did it the first time I renewed it.
In any case, I was on the Historic Commission for several years, maybe 6 or 7. I don't know. I lost track after a while. And that's a very interesting commission. There's no specific. There's advisory. That's what it is. It's an advisory capacity. And sometimes it was fascinating. I thought it was amazing whenever we would get asked to talk about whether the new road names were historically accurate. Was that actually Austin's Ridge? Should we call it Austin's Ridge? Well, not exactly. And there's already a ridge right over there, geographically 10 miles away, that really was Austin's Ridge. So maybe they should try Burnside's Ridge. You could have those conversations for a long time about developers and new roads. But I think the most important thing we did, and I'm really, really pleased to have hung in there long enough. The county owns, I think now it's maybe 19 historic properties for various reasons they've ended up with, many of which had not been exactly surveyed or inventoried. And I went looking around at other communities in the region and said, what's the criteria? How do you track these things? Can we get these things put on CIP before they fall down? Or what does it take to, we need to prioritize. You can't fix all 19 of them every minute, right this minute. And they are all under the auspices of Parks and Recreation, which already has a somewhat limited maintenance budget. And parks are important to living people as opposed to buildings. So it's a balance. And so you have to justify why you do that. In the course of doing that, we realized that there just really wasn't a person anymore. There had been, I want to say maybe in 2012, the last cultural resource preservation planner had resigned or moved on, and they never filled that position, and the position had ended up going away. So we pushed very hard, and we're very proud of the fact that there is now a cultural preservation planner, a historic preservation planner on the county staff because of those efforts. Because we said, look, you have all these facilities, you have all these things, we need someone to represent that.
Right. So I know you've been really integral in the movement for the museum and the cultural center.
Yeah. Well, so I joined that board actually, maybe even while I was doing the 350th. But there was a separate board. There was the Historic Society and there was the Museum Foundation. And one of the first things we did was sit down and say, what do we need to do to actually build a museum? And we thought we should get some museum experts. So we got some experts from the state to come do a really comprehensive study, talk to a lot of stakeholders, and give us a report. And their major issue was that there was not one voice for the county to talk to about history. It was too scattered. There's a commission, there's a society, there's a foundation. Who do people call? So they suggested that we merge the two nonprofit organizations. So that became a big job. And I said, well, I can't do that. It needs a lot of hours. So I will take an assignment at a low rate, but I want to be paid to do that. And they were like, yes, you are now the director of that. And I said, but I won't be on the board anymore because I think ethics are important in government. So that's what happened. So I became the executive director of Stafford's Museum. In the meantime, that was maybe I don't know, 2017 or so. And in the meantime, we've made a lot of headway. But the major thing we've done is we are now under one umbrella. This Historic Society and the museum are all under Discover Stafford. DiscoverStafford.org is the home for that. It's Discover Stafford Museum, Discover Stafford Historic Society, Discover Stafford's History. And so I'm really pleased to see where that is. I just stepped down from that in January, so I'm very happy to have had some help, some guidance in doing that and moving that forward.
And one of the awesome things, many awesome things, but one of the awesome things that I think you did, because you looked at other museums and other things and made it far more hands-on the way they were looking at it. I mean, I would say goggles, but I'm sure there's a fancier
The virtual reality
project is just phenomenal. So that until we get an actual building, which is an interesting process in itself. But I mean, the virtual reality one was just phenomenal.
Well, and it's still there, right? DiscoverStafford.org. You can go there. You don't have to have special goggles. If you have the goggles, you get all the whiz bang woo effects. But if you don't, you can still do it. I think that the issue with museums, I was not a museum professional, right? But I had been a historian involved in a lot of historical stuff. And I just kept, even back during the 350th anniversary, I would go in a room, there'd be, 50 guys over 50 who are planning something or working one of these things. And I would just say, they would come up with these crazy ideas and I would go home. It's almost Christmas. Go home and tell me your grandkids will come do that. And then we'll do it, because we have to make it relevant to kids. And all of us of a certain age are not exactly relevant. And so people older than me think of museums as a physical building with cases that you go and read the labels. And my generation has seen a little bit more movement in interactivity, and younger generations are bored to tears with that altogether completely. So I'm trying to make it relevant. And to make there's another thing, though. We have to make history relevant to now. What about that applies to now? And how do we engage them? And it's really a challenge trying to even get, 20-somethings or teens to even tell us what they think, because they're kind of going, I don't know, because they haven't really, a lot of them haven't been exposed to really high-class museums that are doing that already.
Right.
So we went a different direction, and we've been attending sort of the Virginia Association of Museums events, annual conferences, and trying to learn the state of the industry and how to make things more interactive. We're in a very high technology region in our county. So we found these guys that did the virtual reality project. Wicked cool.
It's phenomenal, yes.
And the thing about that project is that we centered it intentionally on the Revolutionary era. You had to pick an era. And one of the examples is something from Hunter's Iron Works, which Hunter's Iron Works, for those who don't know, was the primary supplier of arms for the Revolutionary War. James Hunter set it up. It was literally renamed Rappahannock Forge. And so there are a few, we think there's 6 or 7 still in existence that actually still have the Rappahannock Forge stamp on them.
Wow.
Well, we found a guy down in Richmond that had one who let us come in and 360-degree camera the entire thing, so that on that virtual reality, you can reach into the case and pick it up and feel it and move it around and understand what that is.
Right. I mean, that's what's phenomenal. People should go to the discoverstafford.org and see that, because it's just it's just so amazing that you go to something and it's 3D. It's not just looking at a picture of it.
Yeah.
It comes to life. It's really awesome what you've done.
Well, and everything we've designed so far has intentionally been also to be able to be used as an educational tool. So that platform is designed so that a teacher can take 50 kids into it at one time, and like you might if you were doing a field trip, which nobody can afford anymore.
Right.
So you can go into that, and the teacher can do it, and then have students, wander around in the space, in the virtual reality space. Kind of cool.
It is. It's really phenomenal. Then you've been also part of the Langley Flight Museum Foundation, which that's another amazing thing that we have in Stafford, which Why don't you fill us in a little bit on that? Because I don't think people realize, and that's at the airport.
I don't know if I could be more proud of anything than that at this point. Samuel Langley in 1896 was the first ever to fly mechanical flight off of wide water, off of a houseboat. And that is fact. And most of his studies and his papers from that helped feed what became the Wright brothers' successful manned flight. Langley tried manned flight and failed. And so the problem, of course, is that everyone just sees failure and never sees gain. I don't know why that is. It's sort of human nature lately. So. But in any case, we recognize that. We saw what happened. I'll back up a smidge. We were redoing our website to be comprehensive and put the two websites together. I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And we took a look at it and went, man, there are just huge gaps. We got a lot of Civil War. We got a lot here. We got a lot there. But we don't have anything about this or this or this. And meanwhile, Phil Horning was working on and just became obsessed with this project. And so there are 4 of us that are the board of the Langley Flight Foundation. And we just decided we had to really celebrate this. So Langley's Aerodrome number 5 has been recreated in exact specifications. We literally were at Udvar-Hazy behind the scenes and able to take specific measurements of every single piece of that aerodrome to exact standards from what it really was from Langley's day when he built it. We made a conscious choice. Obviously, the one that they have at I believe now it's in the early flight galleries downtown at the Air and Space Museum. But that one is one that actually flew. And it was designed to float. It was designed to land in water. It's the reason it was done off a houseboat, so that it could be fished back out, dried off, and try it again. So that one looks like it has been drenched a few times, which it has. It's the original. We decided to go ahead and build what it looked like the first day before it got drenched, what it looked like the first time it flew. And the first time it flew for Aerodrome number 5 was the successful first flight. So we wanted to create it. So it looks a little shiny and new, which is great. That's authentic still, every single piece of it. And then we decided, well, we have to have stuff there in some way to help people understand the story. And that's interactive technology again. So there's a series of kiosks in the airport. You can go anytime that the airport's open, which is like 362 days a year. I mean, it's a lot. You can go there anytime. You can push all the buttons. You can discover what Stafford was like in 1896. There's a whole series of modules. You can discover the history of flight and the importance of this in the entire context, all the way from Icarus and Daedalus, all the way to maybe, I don't know, Space Shuttle. You can see where it fits in the timeline of flight. You can learn all about the detailed mechanical technology. We have taken it apart and done that. And you can also look at the recreated flight, which in itself was a technological miracle that I don't think we could have done even 10 years ago just because of technology. So,
right. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great project. And it all came from donations, corporate donations, et cetera. Not dirt cheap, but, there's 4 people and a whole bunch of people with money and volunteers that built and put this together in 2 years, and made something really substantial that shows the kind of way museums can be in the future.
Right. And that's at Stafford Airport.
It's at Stafford Airport, and you can learn more at langfound.org.
Okay.
langfound.org.
Cool. All right. A couple things now. You're in some new projects because you're like the Energizer Bunny, keep going and going and going.
One finishes, one comes back.
So the African-American Heritage Trail.
Well, this goes to that same conversation about the website having a lot of blank spaces in it. A couple of things happened. We've been, I told you before, we believe in partnerships. And one of the ways to look at spreading the word about history or any project is to find people who aren't already aware of it and partner with them. So I was working with the NAACP on Stafford NAACP on Juneteenth and a Martin Luther King Day projects. And we were talking about Martin Luther King, and I just kept saying, this does not make sense to me. How did all of those people from Georgia and Alabama go to the March on Washington and not pass through Stafford? And I-95 really wasn't a player.
That's right. Yeah.
How did they do that without going through Stafford? And where did they stay? And where did all of them stay? I know it was church-based, but there are not enough churches in the city of Washington to take 500,000 people that were at that march. Where did all those people stay? Was there nobody from Stafford County that went up to that? I can't even believe it. We really started looking and looking and looking. And one of the things we discovered was that there really was. And the other thing was I kept saying, why don't we have a place on the Green Book? This doesn't make sense. Route 1 was a major thoroughfare from early colonial times, that road. Mm-hmm. How is it that we didn't have a Green Book location? And it turned out we did, although it wasn't on the Green Book by choice of Mr. Walker, because he wanted to be open to everyone. He didn't want people to think it was only a black establishment. But we tripped over Walker's Inn, and then we realized we didn't have stuff in the website about a whole bunch of stories. And so at the same time, the city was talking about trying to put together something, and I knew Victoria Matthews over in the city, and I just said, how have you guys done it? And they hooked me up with the geography department at University of Mary Washington, and we just cut it. We did it in a year. About 16 months.
Wow. And there's 23 stops?
There are 23 stops and 31 stories. Some places like Falmouth or Aquia Landing have more than one story. Aquia Landing's interesting. You know, when you look at the stories on this trail, everybody knows that Aquia Landing was where a lot of the 10,000, it's more than that, the path to freedom led to there so they could board ships to go up to Washington, D.C. But how many people know that Henry Box Brown was shipped from there? And that's a whole other story. Or that Frederick Douglass came through there on his way after the Civil War to the grand opening of his newspaper in Washington the next day, and was denied treatment similar to all the other passengers, was not allowed to have a meal. And it got brought up on the Senate floor the next day. So it's actually really well documented, and they refer to the steamer from Aquia, you know. So you have these stories that are like, wait, what? I had never heard that one. Fascinating stories.
So, and where do people find out about it? Where does it start? And
DiscoverStafford.org is the host for the African-American Heritage Trail, and you can find it there. Google it if it's not. I think it's already got an icon on the front page. We literally just unveiled it last week.
Yep.
We haven't even had the public celebration of it yet. But, it's intentionally a driving tour that you can do at any level that you want. Now, I will say to you, you can sit in your living room and just look at the whole thing online, and you will be the worse for it. You will learn a little, but you should see these locations. You should stand on the beach where 12,000 people came across to freedom. Mm-hmm. Just stand there, and you can put it on your device. It's a driving tour. All of the things, technically, if you're following all the driving directions, start at the Stafford Visitor Center at Belmont. Okay. But it's divided geographically, so you could just do some North Stafford. If you're just out shopping and you're bored and you want to just hit something, look up and see whether you've done it in that part of, the county. It's all over the county. Every single one of them is documented and researched, and a whole group of amazing African-American citizens of Stafford have contributed to the project.
That's just amazing, because that's part of the history of Stafford. I mean, quite honestly,
huge part
of it. I just know when I first moved here, I ended up meeting, down at the Conway House down on Falmouth. I'm having a brain
Norman
freeze.
Schools.
Norman Schools. I kept thinking Schooler, and I was like, no, it's not Schooler. But no, yeah, and learning a little bit about that part, and I was just blown away at that.
Right, and he's written a whole book about Falmouth
Yes.
African American history, and we even added to that. So,
Yep.
you know, that's it. About 1/3 are stories that pretty much, if you've been around and listened to history at all in the county, you've heard. But, you know, Chatham is researching new information. Ferry Farm has all sorts of new info. Belmont has recently discovered a list of by name of the enslaved in like the 1830s, I think, 1840s, certainly pre-war. History is not static. This is what people don't understand, right? History is always being discovered. And so we're adding to it.
That's right.
We're just adding the stories that hadn't been there already.
Oh, it was this weekend or last week they found a sarcophagus in Egypt.
Right.
When they were digging up something or parking lot or something.
And they didn't even know that there was another.
Yes.
I think I heard something that they first thought it was a female, like a queen, and then they realized, nope, the way it was painted, it was a king.
Right. One of the Ramses, I think. But it's really amazing that it is instead. Or that the Rappahannock, there used to be sailboats that went all the way up it.
Well, yeah.
Because it used to be a major center.
It was wider, I think.
Yeah, wider and deeper, which is...
well, I mean, that's how Falmouth was founded.
Yes.
It was as high as you could go before the falls,
Yep.
right? And that's where everything from west of here came to be shipped to England and anywhere else that they could sell stuff.
I know. It's just really... it's just
even then,
blows your
even
mind,
in colonial times, like I'm talking like, 1650, even then they knew how fertile the Shenandoah region was and the Piedmont were, and that people were out there growing stuff and bringing it to Falmouth to sell.
So, yeah.
And that was before we even had a currency. The currency was
right,
literally tobacco.
Yes.
That was the currency.
I know.
It's crazy.
It is. It's really...
I mean, I just want to say one of the things about the African-American Trail as an example, 20th century history, mid-20th century history. In the early 60s, there were 2 horrible fires in the Widewater area that took a total of 11 black children died in 2 different house fires, just all under 8. I mean, just horrible stories. Their older siblings were at school, their parents were at work, a caretaker or someone looked away or, had something that happened, and literally they were engulfed with flames and could not be saved. Horrible stories. And out of that, the community, because at that time, all of Widewater was relying on Quantico Fire Department for fire support, which is just ridiculous even now if you think about it. And the community came together, and one of the people I interviewed said, my daddy said that, water has no color, and we're all going to work on this together. And the Decaters and the Pondexters and the Jacksons all came together and said, we're going to form a volunteer fire department. That's where Widewater Fire Department came. And out of that came Mr. Pondexter, who ended up being ultimately the first African-American fire chief in the state, and then the first president of the Virginia volunteer fire departments. So you have this horrible story that turns to a success story and shows the value of community, which nobody had ever documented.
Right. Truly, yes.
And so people had appreciated and given him an award for his longevity and all of his service, but that's not the same thing as recognizing the meat of where that came from.
And continuing the fact. I mean, I tell my students different stories about things that happened in our end of the county, and they're just blown away that how much like community actually mattered, and it superseded the other thing, which is really that's that. And they're like, oh my gosh, Stafford's not as ridiculous as I thought. I'm like, no, that's why you look into it. So speaking of looking into, now we have the Bring Eliza Home Project.
Right. Well, I got invited to join this, I guess, because people think I can help them get things done, and I suppose I can.
No.
But no. But so Eliza Monroe Hay was James Monroe's oldest daughter. He only had 2 living children that lived past childhood, and it was Eliza and Mariah, about 10 years or more between them. But Eliza, through a series of, She was born in King George because her father was their house wasn't ready in Fredericksburg, but this is when he was going to open the law office. So they were part of the Fredericksburg community for a number of years. And ultimately, he was posted, when she was sort of late elementary school, he was posted to France. So she was like all proper children of the day, educated with the French students in French schools. They came back. He had a number of other postings, and then Jefferson sent him back over as the ambassador for Great Britain and France. And she was, a teen, and so she went to sort of the finishing school level, again, with pretty much the same friends, some of whom ended up being Napoleon's niece, things like that. So well connected. But that's what you would expect an ambassador's child to have gone to those schools. In any case, she ended up through a series of things over a course of, I think it was 4 years. She lost her mother, then her husband, then her father, then her daughter, to illnesses, natural causes really maybe for the elder people. But she lost pretty much everybody. All she had left was her grandchildren and her sister. And she never really got any of her inheritance for a variety of reasons, a lot of which has to do with the condition of women's rights in the mid-1800s, in the mid-17th and 19th century. It wasn't good. So first her husband was responsible, and then that was passed to her son-in-law was responsible for her inheritance. Her brother-in-law was responsible for the inheritance of her father. It was really never an opportunity for a perfectly capable woman to have her own. So she was told to go to Paris in her early 50s. She had, we think, maybe some kind of tuberculosis or some kind of lung disease. She was told she needed a sea voyage. So she decided to go to Paris and visit, never intended to stay, and ended up continuing to fight for her inheritance there and dying penniless. At the same time, this is how I got brought into it. One of Monroe's, while he was in the White House, one of his workers, assistants, clerks, was Daniel Brent of the Brent family of Marlborough Point and Stafford County. Okay. And Daniel Brent, at that time when Eliza was back in Paris, had known her in the White House, had known of her family, surely knew that she was the daughter of a president. And he was the consul general to France at the time, to Paris. So when she passed, he had recently purchased in a very famous cemetery, Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. He had purchased plots for important Americans that might pass, and it happens. And she ended up being one of the first people put in one of those plots. Fast forward to maybe 6 years ago, I'm on the James Monroe Foundation board, and the James Monroe Museum got a letter from Père Lachaise, all in French, saying, we think we might have one of your missing daughters, and nobody really knew that she was there. And it turned out that it was in an unkempt part of the cemetery. Some people locally, Catherine Willis, has family in France. She was going there anyway, so she went and helped get that all cleaned up. And at the same time, over at Ashlawn, at the James Monroe family home, there was some docents over there that were told, research things, and Barbara had gone and discovered that this was a story that hadn't been told. And so all of that came together with four of us kind of saying, we need to bring Eliza back. She needs to be buried in Hollywood Cemetery with her mother and her father and her sister, and there's a fourth space at what it's called the Birdcage in Hollywood Cemetery, sitting there waiting if anyone ever found Eliza, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So we're in the process of trying to bring Eliza home. Boy, I can't tell you how tedious it is dealing with French bureaucracy. Barbara has done a lot of the work. We had to translate everything into French. They wanted proof of every known descendant of Eliza and all of their bona fides, like what makes you a descendant. So show me your birth certificate, all these copies. And then one person to represent them to say, yes, we would like to exhume her. And then they turned around and said, oh, but wait, Daniel Brent bought this, so he really owned it. So we need all of his descendants researched. Short version was it took about 2 years to gather about 500 descendants, all in compliance and in
golly.
agreement, and find them all to say, yes, please, dear Lord, please bring her back. So Père Lachaise has told the U.S. Embassy that anytime now they're ready to say yes. So we're now working out all the logistics of that and doing a bit of a fundraising campaign.
Oh, wow.
So we have an event on March 19th.
Okay.
HFFI.org has the information about that. It's an event in Fredericksburg to come learn more about Eliza's story, meet Barbara, who's written a book, and, HFFI, Historic Fredericksburg Foundation, Inc., has graciously hosted us as the nonprofit so that people can make donations in regards to tax-free kind of thing.
Oh, neat.
It's a great project, but the tediousness of French bureaucracy.
Oy vey. Mon Dieu.
Mon Dieu. Mon Dieu.
So what's the event on the 19th?
March 19th. It's going to be in the basement of St. George's. I'm not positive. It's an evening event.
Okay.
And it is designed to be more information, learn more about Eliza,
okay.
learn more about our project and where we stand at that minute. And it changes all the time. We had a meeting today. We're still waiting to hear from Père Lachaise.
HFI.org.
HFFI.org.
2 Fs. Okay.
Yeah. But March 19th, people are more than welcome to come to that. And
Awesome.
yeah, it's very interesting, though. This thing about history, right, where every single time I tell people that story or anybody, most of these stories, they go, I didn't know that. Wow, cool. I didn't know that. Which always surprises me because I love that stuff. I eat it up. I look for it, obviously. But I don't know if this happens to you as a teacher in school. It was a teacher that turned me on to history. So hopefully you've done that with more than one or two. But, history is something that feeds our understanding of who we are and who we were, and maybe reinforces the good part of us, maybe reminds us of the bad part of us, right? And still can surprise us.
Yes.
All the time.
And it's sort of in this culture of I have my phone, I can get it instantaneously. It sort of gets them to think there's something deeper than if I just Google it, I find it and I move on. It's just really, and that's a nice feeling if you see that, which is what I think you get when you're doing something and you see the little eyeballs sparkle.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, they get it. They get that.
They
There's
got
something.
it. They got it. Like, wait, somebody flew before the Wright brothers?
Yep.
What?
And it's here. Yes.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. I mean, that sort of gets us to the last question about historic preservation, which is you said that. So I guess that once we finally get her home, what's the next project?
Lordy, I don't know. Well, in terms of Eliza, we're going to get Eliza home, and then we're going to have a big celebration of her getting home next spring in 26. Of course, Virginia's about to celebrate the Revolution. Mm-hmm. I'm not directly involved. I'm part of a team of people that's really trying to bump up and look at what's happening or what is, again, not really properly known about James Hunter, and the importance of that forge and that ironworks and how physically huge it was. When Thomas Jefferson presciently figured out that we needed to start pumping up forges, and he knew Hunter and knew it was there already, and sort of gave him money from the state to start. He wanted really to protect that Virginia's militia would have enough, right? It turned out to be a lot more than that because George came from here and poof, now you're everybody. But that, when Hunter built that up, he tripled the size of this county population by importing quality forgers and blacksmiths and people who understood. There was a huge influx of Quakers that came because everyone understood the Quakers were not likely to take up arms, but would they make them? Yes, they're amazing artisans in that regard. There was a very large contingent of freed slaves and some enslaved that were also part of that. But the population of Stafford County tripled to support that forge. Think about that, though. I mean, if you took, what are we at, 200,000 maybe in the
Roughly,
county?
yeah.
I mean, if you took us to 600,000 in less than 4 months, you might notice.
Yes.
And yet that whole project has sort of fallen away and isn't there anymore, and you can't physically go see it. So once again, we've got to start looking at technology, looking at ways of making that happen. And some of my experiences with the Langley Project on how to bring that alive and recreate that with technology is going to come into play maybe as part of that. We're hoping to celebrate Hunter in January or in June of 26.
Okay.
I'm just a small part of that larger project, and I'm not in charge of it, thank goodness. I'm really am trying to retire. I do have a couple of books that I want to write that I've tripped over stories that have just never been properly fleshed out and need to be. So they're on my sitting there just screaming at me any time now to find time to do that.
Oh, neat.
And I'm a world traveler, so it's completely not related to historic preservation, but I'm at 146 countries right now, and I sort of feel like I got to hit 150. I don't know. I just have to.
It's just that, right, go to an even number, Awesome. Well, and it's sort of interesting because we're both seasoned enough to know to have been there for the 200th anniversary of the country. And we're going to the 250th. And I guess the state's doing something, but as a
The
county,
nation
we're
is.
not.
Everyone is.
Yeah, but we're
The
just
county
sort of-
is.
We're tying it in with what the state's doing. We're not doing anything specific. At
No,
least what I was told
there's projects in play.
Okay.
There's projects in place. There's a Stafford 250 committee, and there are definitely projects in play. I think that's going to come out anytime now. I think our deadline to get all of our plans in place was early March. So
Okay.
probably before May,
Oh, good.
we'll have the complete list of the ways we're going to celebrate. But the
Interesting.
county is
Okay.
certainly celebrating. This is a fascinating thing. I love that I don't think it's state, I think it's national, made a point of saying we're not just celebrating, okay, the battle of such and such was on this day. You could certainly celebrate that. But we also want to celebrate the purpose and the foundations that were built and how that has played. And that has intentionally broadened the scope of how you can celebrate what our forefathers did. They created a place that has diversity. They created a place with religious freedom. They created a place that celebrates those essential freedoms in our Bill of Rights. And all of those things have fed 250 years of growth. So to try to say that it's just a celebration about, I don't know, the day we tipped the tea into the harbor is minimizing it.
Right.
The impact of what we've done, and personally, I mean, I don't want to get hyper political, but I think that personally, that's what we have stood for. Our democracy has stood for that. It's caused a lot of other places in the world, particularly the French, to look at community involvement, of individual involvement in freedom, and how that can feed and make a place stronger, a sense of a place stronger. But we've done that now for 250 years around the world. I hope we continue to. I'm not quite sure at the moment. I'm a little nervous, but I do think that is really an important thing to celebrate.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that because I kept trying to, I asked and I wasn't getting, I got that, what I was told was that our tourism group is part of what the state's doing. So I'm very happy to hear there's something locally that's
Well,
being done
tourism is
because-
leading the charge, and there's a whole group of people, all of the
Okay.
places that you would expect, Ferry Farm and Belmont, but also all the places you might not expect. I mean, there's a history of beer in this country, right? Why wouldn't they celebrate?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, did you know that, was it from Marlboro Point? What was his name? Hunter. No, I can't remember which one. Tried to have a brewery out at Marlboro Point and had advertised in Williamsburg and everything. And the overwhelming, it's like the Facebook of its day, basically wrote back and went, yeah, no. Your beer's no good. No, nobody's going to buy your beer. Like, go back to other stuff. Your beer's bad. But they had a brewery in Stafford County, a commercial brewery.
And now we've got the winery up there at the end of the county. All right. So I guess just some closing thoughts. What we normally do is ask people if they have any particular story or thing about the county they'd like to relay. Just sort of like the flavor of the county.
I have spent time as a professional photographer, as a travel photographer, and I was blessed during the 350th to be all over the county. Literally, I was on every small road in this county. And I feel like maybe that's another book, or maybe that's just some series that needs to go on Facebook or something. But I feel like there are these classic views of Stafford County that are just exquisite, maybe even at specific times of year. If you come down Brook and you're going towards the Brook Railroad Station in fall, when all those pumpkins are sitting there on that hill, it's gleaming in the sun with that beautiful little white church and behind them. It's just like, oh, look at this wonderful place. Or springtime out where the bluebells are up in Rock Hill, and just driving along there on the backside of Quantico, just that last little teeny piece of Stafford County is all these bluebells all over the place. We're blessed with nature. The eagles flying on the Rappahannock and the Potomac, but the Rappahannock, you see them more because it's a smaller river. So that's my overwhelming things. This place has welcomed me and made it my home. It's not the other way around. I have embraced it. I've noticed it, but it was open arms. People, nature, the place, all over the county.
Yes, it is very special.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, we appreciate you being here, Sue, and
Thanks.
letting us know about the history of Stafford County. And we really appreciate all that you have done for this county. It's just amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. It's fun to have all these individual projects. They have an endpoint. They're done. Yeah. Move on to the next one.
Yay. Great. Thank you again, Sue, for sharing your time and insights with us. And thank you for your recent work on the Stafford African-American History Trail and the Bringing Eliza Home Project. Your work is important to preserving the character of the Stafford community, so thank you. You've given us a lot to think about. And I want to thank you as well for joining us on this episode. We do appreciate you and hope that you will refer us to all your friends. And again, while we're on the subject of friends, we want to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for their kind donation to this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center on 215 Kings Highway. Next time you're in the area, stop by and get yourself a treat. You'll be glad you did. Until then, I'm Tom Coen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a Rivers Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere that you get your podcast or catch our video on YouTube. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.